Welcome to the Courageous Girls podcast. I'm your host, Tara Mattson. I am author of Courageous, Being Daughters Rooted in Grace. And I'm also the content developer and co-founder of Courageous Girls with my husband, Jeff. And I'm just so grateful that you're here. Today, I am going to read through chapter 5. Well, not the entire book, but Courageous, if you've not ever read it. If you have read it, this will be a great reminder for you. But chapter 5 is really talking about the impact of community and the need to learn to live in community with God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and with other human beings, and the both and. So I'm going to read, and then I'll give you some of my offline comments here about this particular chapter and how it's shaping a lot of what we're doing in the Courageous Girls movement. The person who loves their dream of community will destroy community, but the person who loves those around them will create community. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the book Life Together. P.S. You need to get that book. It's one of my favorites. So we all have felt alone at some point in our lives, sometimes in the midst of a crowd of people we call friends. Traveling the road of motherhood, especially in the earlier years, can be some of the loneliest and longest times. Throughout many years of my private practice, I have listened to women share how hard it is to find friends they really trust. The void of authentic friendships in their lives leaves them uncertain and insecure about how to coach their daughters to foster relationships and manage other natural dilemmas that arise in female friendships. How do we handle mean girls? How do we prevent the formation of cliques? How do we find a best friend who will be faithful? What does a healthy friendship even look like? No matter our place in life, we all have a need to be seen and valued and to belong. It's knit into the very fabric of who we are as people. The desire to have a small tribe we call our own is common to all women. No matter how introverted or independent we claim to be, we all long for a landing place where we can be ourselves. Jesus invites us as Christians into the deep waters of faith, and this often looks like intentional community. Within those deep waters of faith is a space where relationships between women are created and nurtured. We all long for it, yet many of us only dip our toes in the shallow end. Women have a difficult time, to say the least, standing firm and being confident in female relationships. We approach relationships cautiously, hiding behind our masks and politely extending stiff arms to one another. The undercurrent of competitiveness and comparison cultivates insecurity, provoking women to bolt rather than move toward one another. Our caution with female relationships can be exhausting. Just giving up is a tempting alternative. Ironically, clinical research shows that women generally desire closer emotional relationships than men. We have a great capacity to be known and to know one another, yet at the depths of our souls, we actually fear this vulnerability. This fear causes us to sabotage relationships, sometimes even before they begin, with gossip, surface interactions, busyness, pleasing, avoidance, and more. If God created women with a deep desire for relational connection, why do we resist? I've heard many women confess that they do not invest in female relationships to avoid drama. I assure you, if you are raising a daughter, you will be required to interact with other girls and their moms who regularly find themselves in the middle of this kind of relating. Drama doesn't have to be the end all. In fact, it can be a catalyst for change, good or bad, in each of us. Drama can be defined as an exciting, emotional, or unexpected event or circumstance. Most people love a good drama series on Netflix because it's packed with interesting characters and plot twists. Perhaps we can view living in community with others in a similar way. When I read the Gospels, I find a lot of drama. Personally, I could do without it, but when I remember that Jesus said that all the laws depend on our love for God and others, I cannot deny that community is a part of his plan. I want to help the next generation of girls who are growing up in some of the most emotionally disconnected days in history. I want to help them live as Jesus intended. This means they must be rooted in community. That begins with us finding or creating community wherever we go. Our girls will have an easier time embracing healthy community if we decide to go there first. Whether we always seem to find ourselves in the middle of betrayal or hurtful relationships, or whether we've developed some clever coping strategies to protect ourselves from being hurt by others, we must face our fears and dive into the deep waters of community together. This is part of the reason why Courageous Girls asks moms to be involved and committed to one another over a long period of time. Side note, I ask them to be together for a minimum of 3 years, and I'll explain why in a minute. Courageous Girls groups are not the only kind of group, or they're not like other groups. We're deeply intentional, long-term communities of mothers and daughters who fearlessly address every issue that shapes the lives of our girls today, or at least that's my dream of it. Through years of practice, we're aiming to build healthy community before our daughters leave home. And this group is one where moms and daughters go deep in relationship with each other, with female peers, and with God. Even dads will learn to have more meaningful relationships with their wives and other dads as they intentionally pursue their girls in these communities. Humans are designed for intimacy, to be known and to know another, and trust is an essential ingredient of intimacy, but can be built only with time, consistency, and ironically, conflict. Most relationships do not arrive at conflict until 2 years into knowing each other. This is around the point when the honeymoon stage ends, and many of us jump ship long before we get to see what God will do post-honeymoon and post-conflict. The journey of mothering girls and a journey of humility, one where you get the privilege, yes, privilege, of seeing others in a new light as we participate in shrinking the gap between whom we say we want to be and who we actually are. And that's the name of my other book with my husband, Jeff. And as well as between what we say we want from our daughters and what we actually teach them. She goes where trust is without borders. I'm going to stop there. Maybe that intrigued you as I read that title, but we talk about the balance in this chapter. I talk about the balance of being alone with God and knowing community with Him, and how to lean into relationships with others, because that is where we're healed. In fact, we're wounded in relationships and we're healed in relationships. And one of the things that is so important as we're journeying with our daughters is they've got to experience the things we want for them. Some of us moms, we didn't even know this was possible to do community in this way. Some of you have heard community and koinonia, and you have small groups at church, and this is just a part of your discipleship, but you're still not really sure you want to go deeper with women, right? Maybe you've been in a small group from church with men and women, but you might not call these women your closest friends. I had a girlfriend read this book, and she afterwards was like, after reading this, especially chapter 5 and chapter 6 about friendship, she's like, I have really great community. I don't feel alone, and I actually feel like I'm very rich. And I said, good, I'm glad you see that now and didn't realize that that's not the norm. If you have incredible community with other women, it means probably a couple things. It means your mom, you probably have good relationship and have a family of origin story where women weren't competitive, but were caring and collaborated together. Or maybe because you didn't have that, you had really amazing discipleship and was drawn to healthier women who taught you how to be in relationship with women, and not just in an insecure, competitive way. But the majority of women in general who are raising the next generation of women in the church have never experienced, I shouldn't say never, but haven't often experienced a healthy relationship with other women. There is this weird dynamic that happens. And we live in those of you that live on the West, I know Courageous Girls groups are all over the globe, so this might not really relate, or it's maybe not your cultural backdrop. You come from more of a we or a community-oriented type backdrop. But those of us that live in Western culture in the United States generally understand an independent worldview, and it really has infiltrated the church. And as Christians, you'll hear people say, well, it's really about me and my relationship with God. And, I listen to church online and podcasting and, it's really my own quiet time with God. Or now more people have understood about spiritual formation and spiritual direction and silence and solitude, which I'm like, hallelujah. Yes, because we're teaching our daughters that in Courageous Girls as well. It's a part of my discipleship and a backdrop. But it's not just, you can't pull away and just be with God and grow. You have to have authentic, known community with others who see you and know you and move through conflict. That's how we discover who we are. In fact, children discover who they are by the way that mom and dad reflect back and mirror back who they are. So hopefully we're mirroring back to our children the way that God made them, not who we want them to be or who we wish they would be, or pointing out all the negative places they need to grow, but we're affirming and we're going, wow, God made you so curious. You love to get your hands dirty and try something and see how it goes. That's the way God made you. That's how we discover who we are. Well, for those of us mamas who have never had anybody help us discover that, that's what community does. And being able to be with other women who are teaching us about who we are. One of my favorite off the grid stories about my first Courageous Girls group with my oldest daughter, when we started this, my baseline premise was I just want my daughter to see what it's like to lead a group of women and to be in relationship with women and go through all the ups and downs and all the feelings, right? The jealousy that comes and the comparison and the frustrations and the annoying and the they're not like me or they should be. I wish I was more like them. And so I wanted that. I also wanted her to see both my daughter's experience, but particularly the first one that I started this group with. I wanted her to see what all these other women were like, because I'm the only mom in her life and I'm a unique individual. And my daughter is actually very different from me in many ways. Our wiring, we talk about the core values index, and we'll talk about that in chapter 6. But we use that as a way to help people to understand their wiring, communication, conflict strategies, where they get anxious, their greatest gifts and contributions to the community. And our wirings are very different. And I could see that from when she was really young. And I just wanted her to see what other women, how other women lead, how they engage in the world and how God uses them. So one of my favorite things that happened in Courageous Girls is over the years, as we each took time to lead, at the time there was 8 of us, 8 moms and 8 daughters. And every time we took a turn, you would just see how, though I wrote the curriculum, the moms would make it their own and they would do it their way. The most introverted, mom was able to probably her wiring was more orderly and organized and linear. And then, the mom who was more kinesthetic would bring in crafts and bring us, activities, and the teachers in the community would make it a little bit better than what I offered because I'm not a teacher, a trained school teacher. And so all that to say, it was so fun for my girls to learn, like, wow, look at how God uses different women. And they had personal relationships with these women. And these women spoke life into my daughters and spoke who they saw them to be. And not only for our girls did we do that, we did that for each other. There were so many things over the years that women started to discover about themselves because we were in a community where we were practicing being willing to celebrate one another, not compete. And that is very much the way of Genesis 3 and the fight for women is to be competitive. The curse was that Eve would be, she'd have childbearing pain, but she would also be ruled by man. And my bias is that perpetuates a competition between women, whether that's in the workspace and them trying to get ahead because men are the ones making the decisions on who they're going to hire. And so women can be really catty in the workplace, ironically, or whether that's, the competition for attention from men and being the most beautiful or the funniest, or, it's not obvious. We're not all talking about this, but it's a feeling that women have. And I've heard it over and over and over. And it comes from jealousy, and it comes from a sense of insecurity that my place might get thwarted or is not as valuable as your place in the community. And so learning that we get to know who we are, we figure out who we are in the context of community and mirroring that back to one another, verbalizing things that we think and practicing putting choice in the room and hearing affirmations and ways that people go, wow, I learned more about God, or I see more of this part of God in you. Um, I reflect this side of him, you reflect that side of him, and together we reflect, or all of us reflect him, the body of Christ. This is the way we practice it day in, day out, and it's with a consistent group. And so that's the other factor, that in community, we are very quick to exit our communities in this culture when we are like, sorry, I don't like this, too much conflict, I'm out. Or we ignore the conflict and it becomes toxic. That it's like a little icky, honestly, it's like a cancer cell that starts to spread if we don't address it, right? And so it can really kill the entire community. At the end of the day, time and consistency is how you build trust, and you have to move through conflict. And so that statistic about you really don't get to conflict in any relationship until year 2, usually at the end of year 2. Anybody can love each other and do things well for 1 year. Year 2, you start to see where you're different and where you start to rub each other. Year 3, if you make it to year 3 and you've worked through some of the conflicts, you start to really value and go, wow, we really trust each other and we've got something really special here. And you start to realize you can make it through your differences and through using your voice and through being able to, when you offend each other, make it right. So year 3 is my dream for every Courageous Girls group, is that they'll make it 3 years. Oftentimes they continue. My oldest group made it 9, and I'm in my 9th year with my youngest now. And so depending on when you're listening to this, I could be done and launched my daughters. But for now, we're finishing up. And it's incredible to see the lineage and the history and the way that God has used our relationships. Are we all besties? No. And I think that's really an important piece. This relationship between mom and daughter is the most vital part. It's an intentional community to practice what it means to be a daughter rooted in grace, to know our identity as a daughter of the King and how to be in relationship with his other daughters. Does that mean that we do everything together? No. And I think there'll be little relationships within. Some moms are closer. Some girls are closer. Maybe it's because they have danced together or they go to school together. That is normal. And that's part of the practice, is to be able to celebrate, wow, I'm really glad they're really good friends. And then to look for something that's important to you or what you need. That's the balance in the practice, instead of going, oh, they have a clique over there and now we're creating some toxicity. Or if it does get clicky, we start to talk about it. We say, hey, sometimes we just feel really left out and on the outside. And that part of the community starts to have some awareness about how they impact those around them. All of this gets taken out of the Courageous Girls group into our communities at school and at church and into our neighborhoods and eventually into our marriages and into our families. This is my big audacious dream, but it's not just a dream. It was a vision that the Lord gave me in all the years of my practice, and I am seeing it happen. I hear it all the time from courageous girl leaders and mamas all over the place. So if you're like, this doesn't sound realistic for me, I just want you to start by just praying and saying what that's about. There's a lot of innovation, a lot of moms who are like, hey, we live in a certain part of the world that isn't convenient, so we do ours online. That's not my ideal. I want face-to-face connection. During COVID, a lot of the Courageous Girls groups had to work to meet online. At the end of the day, if that's the way you have to do it, that's the way you have to do it. And I trust that God will use that. So there isn't a right or a wrong. It's just there's a kind of a best practice. And the best practice is ideally with a group of moms and daughters that you're going to be in regular community with. So you are an incredible mama. And maybe you're not even a mama and you're just listening to this because you are a woman and maybe your kids are raised, or maybe you don't have kids. And either way, these are things you can be working on and growing in. It's just a bonus if we've got a daughter because we're discipling her, but maybe there's another woman in your wake of influence and you want to read this book with her. I know a lot of moms of adult daughters have been reading Courageous, and then they go through the questions at the end and are healing. A lot of the things that were missed along the way or hurt. I'm so grateful that moms have taken initiative for that. I also know a lot of women who are not moms, but really disciple and mentor a lot of young girls around them. And so you could also do that, or maybe read this with other moms in your community who are the moms of their daughters and help launch them into Courageous Girls groups. Anyways, just some encouragement there. I'm so grateful that you're in this journey with me. Oh, and I didn't say in this, but it's a really important point that we'll talk about at later points when we talk about our relationship with God in silence and solitude. But that is also another part of community, is learning how to pull away and learning how to take time to hear his voice, to let him tune into our hearts and our minds. We do a lot of that in practicing how to journal and how to read our words and how to pray. And not just always in community, but in silence and in time with him. So the both and must exist in order for us to discern and to be able to stay healthy. So I think I've said so majority of this episode. I just want to end with how proud I am of you and just how grateful. And my word for you today is just to maybe a practice, something to practice, is to pray about the who in your life that you want to be more intentional with. Maybe you're not ready to start a Courageous Girls group, but you are ready to maybe reach out to another woman and say, you know what, I'd love to start meeting weekly or monthly and just getting to know you better and sharing our lives together. Maybe it's you do play dates regularly together. You're not ready to start a Courageous Girls group because your kids are too young. Maybe you read this book together. It'll definitely help you go deeper if you read the book together. So until next time, share this with someone, help somebody know about Courageous Girls, and spread the word about the Courageous Girls podcast. We're here to resource you. I'm your trusted resource for a time such as this, raising daughters in a world of such confusing messages, digital disconnection, and isolation. We're in this. God's got us, and it's going to be an amazing journey. Wherever you are, he starts right here, right now, as long as you are open with a yes, sure, I'll go on this journey with you, God. Thank you for being here. And until next time, keep remembering that you are the right mama for the job. Bless you. So you're ready to start your Courageous Girls group? Good. Go to mycourageousgirls.com or download the Courageous Girls app. And what you're going to do is you're going to register, and then you have access to all the curriculum. If you want to start your group, you're going to pray, Lord, who do you want me to start this with? Reach out for 1 to 2 other mamas and begin praying and asking God to show you. You really only need 5 to 8 of you, with daughters that are around the same ages. So if you're going to start in 2nd grade, 2nd and 3rd grade, if you're going to start in 6th grade, 5th and 6th grade, you don't want to have a huge break there. But go to mycourageousgirls.com. We've got coaching information for you. And really, you start your group and you each are going to lead 1 time a month throughout the year. So really, if you've got 5 people in your group, you'll lead maybe once or twice a year. This is created for busy moms to help you walk and talk with your daughter at every stage of your growing years. This curriculum is so unique in that it's biblically, clinically, and relationally attuned to what girls are needing today. And I am your trusted guide. I've written all the curriculum. I've walked through it with my own girls, and I think you are ready for this. If you are nervous, that's normal. Part of this journey is trusting that God uses your yes and your trust that he will do the rest.